by two guests. They're going to talk about the impact of the drought and how it can be averted. These are guests from the African Technology Policy Studies. We have Dr. Nicholas Ozo and Dr. Kevin Orama, who have joined in the fray and are going to actually talk about this in depth to educate the public on what they should do to mitigate this current crisis. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. If you've seen the images, heart-wrenching images of the northern part of this country and also Horn of Africa. What do you think is the problem, and how are we going to avert this crisis if we start from the Kenyan matter? Maybe we can start with you.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning. I think I will try to look at this from a longer-term perspective, from the policy aspects and also from the practical solutions that we as Africans and also Kenyans can do in order to try and avert these kinds of problems. Generally, we find that these issues of drought in Kenya, in other parts of Africa, are recurrent events. They are not things we do not know that they will happen. And these are things we know they will happen, and yet we are caught unawares whenever they happen. So the issues of long-term planning is a major issue that we need to look into in order to try and avert this. And this comes from the perspectives of the government of Kenya and the government of African countries to actually start thinking about putting in policy frameworks that will help to build our resilient capacity. That's the ability of Kenyans to be able to respond to these kinds of natural events when they do happen. And there are lots of technologies out there that we can learn from. There are also other countries out there who I would say are living in permanent drought situations. I was recently in Israel studying their water infrastructure and how they've managed to use drip irrigation to turn a desert into a food basket for most of the region in that area. They are exporting food and they are living in a desert, basically. Egypt is in Africa, and we can learn a lot from them in terms of what they have done to be able to address this. And the solution is only one word: irrigated agriculture.
Nicholas also joins us this morning. Maybe you can tell us, where did we go wrong, maybe as a state?
Thank you very much. I will start by saying it's not about where we got wrong about this, but especially what is important is what do we do, because we do not need to begin to recount our problems and challenges. Actually, the issue Dr. Rama raised in terms of having an early warning system, that is the basic thing that will tell us that we are going to have drought, we are going to have a food crisis situation, and that once we get to know about this, we put measures in place and not politic about it. We make sure that we apply the necessary measures, practical solutions. This time around, it's not about making policies.
That's right.
It's about implementing it. So if we say we have government bodies that are responsible for, first of all, identifying that there will be a drought, if that government body identifies such, they should also come out with practical solutions on what to do. And like he said, irrigated agriculture. We have to apply those measures in order to forestall future droughts. It's not totally about saying that the best thing to do is to do that or do this in terms of policy, but we have to put it in practice. Because countries that have survived, we know countries like Israel and Egypt, like he said, are purely living in desert areas. But today, you see, they are exporters of food. They are not using very foreign materials to survive. So we need to understudy those countries. We need to bring their expertise into play and make sure that we transform our desert areas, our drought-prone areas, into a food basket to sustain our livelihoods.
Dr. Urama, what are some of these policies that the government can establish to mitigate some of these future occurrences?
Okay, like Dr. Nicholas has also already mentioned, and I also said that we need to actually put agriculture first. The allocations of our budgets to agriculture in the whole of African countries does not actually reflect the fact that agriculture is a food basket for Africa. It is also a major contributor to our gross domestic product and generally the income we get in Africa and also the employment basket for Africa. So we need to ensure that the agriculture ministry in every African country, in Kenya, and also related ministries like water and irrigation, other related ministries that will be able to bear on food security would be able to get enough resources to be able to plan ahead. I have to also say that if you look at the Kenya situation, some of these ministries have done their best in trying to address the situation within the resource capacities that they have. And I also think about the special programs ministry here in Kenya that have also tried to put in the grain reserves and tried all sorts of ways that they can. But we all know that if I have 10 bob and I go to Uchumi, I can only buy something that is worth 10 bob. And if I have 100 million, I can go there and buy things that's worth 100 million. So if I have to help Kenyans as a minister, if I'm a minister in Kenya, then that resource capacity needs to be provided. That's one thing. Then the second thing is also educating our people, because some of these crises do happen. And also I know that in Africa, we do have peaks now in our production season.
Right.
There are times that we produce a lot of milk, a lot of rice, a lot of maize, but the storage capacity is not there. And the food processing to improve the shelf life of the food, so that at the times of the lean seasons, like we have now in Kenya, we will be able to draw on the times that we had bumper harvests. That also needs to be thought about very carefully. And also in terms of regional planning, so that we look at these disadvantaged regions of the country where we know that naturally, not because of their own fault, because of the nature's own call, that we have seasonal droughts in that area. We need then to try as much as possible without politicking about it, but thinking about the life of every Kenyan to install irrigation capacities in those areas, to invest in those areas before the drought happens. And like Nicholas said, now the drought is with us. The action, the best action to take is like what I saw yesterday, the launching of the Kenyans for Kenya program. And then calling on all Kenyans, not to say the government should do it, because again, the government has limited budget and has other priorities to look into. So every Kenyan, every African, in fact, every human being should actually run to the race of the other human being to rescue the other human being who has been exposed to some natural hazards. So early warning systems, adequate policy environment in terms of even implementation and budget allocation to these relevant ministries are very important. And also education and awareness creation for the people who are affected, so that when we have bumper harvest, we save for the lean seasons is also there, and also creating storage capacities and food processing capacities so that we can improve the shelf life of food. You know, it might surprise us to know that some of the rice we import are over 10 years old in the countries where they were produced. But these are people who have built enough storage capacity and also food processing capacities, food technologies that are able to preserve the food for longer. And then even if there's drought, they can then draw on what they have already.
Let's talk about the reality. Let's talk about the reality here. And I like it that you said that the relevant ministries are trying to do something. If I can or may inform you that some of the relevant ministries, the ministers are nowhere to be found when this crisis is hitting the country. And we were warned from November last year. And yet the government, the whole government as a whole, has been silent about it until the media came out and said, you know what, our people in the northern part of this country are dying. The Horn of Africa is dying. And then you see the government coming in and saying, you know what, you are putting us in bad light. What would you say about that? What happens in Nigeria when, you know, some of these things happen? What happens? Maybe you can give us a scenario of Nigeria per se.
Yeah, what I was saying this is there is need for long-term planning. Anytime you don't have long-term planning, be it a person or a government or an agency, you plan only for the short term, then you will be caught unawares. So what I will tell you is that, one, the nation needs to have a priority We need to prioritize our events. We need to prioritize our needs, first of all. And then, after the prioritization, then we take action based on need.
Right.
And one major problem that Africans used to have, especially our governments, is they wait until the dying minute. If we put measures in place ab initio to forestall long-term events, I can tell you, Nigeria is not different, actually. It's an African problem. We lack that skill. Not that we don't have the skill to do it, but we pretend and face low-hanging fruits to harvest and eat for today, and then we can be hungry for tomorrow. So we need to prioritize our needs and then have a long-term plan on how we'll tackle our problems. That is the best solution for this kind of events and to forestall its occurrences.
All right, you can join into this debate. The number to SMS is 8040. Ask your questions. Send us your comments. What do you feel the government should do? We are looking for alternatives here. We are looking for a solution here to mitigate this current drought situation we're facing in the country. The number again is 8040. Ask my guests the questions you want to be answered. Send us your comments and your feelings about this situation in the country and what needs to be done to avert this crisis. Maybe you can come back to you, Dr. Orama. I think you have something burning you really want to say.
Now you asked the question about where the government agencies, the government ministries, the government of Kenya are while this is happening. And I would like to actually strongly say that in African countries, I would actually rate the government of Kenya as one that is actually trying its best within the resources that Kenya has.
Yeah.
And then if you think about, you said to look into Nigeria. If you think about Nigeria, Nigeria is a little bit more resource rich than Kenya is in terms of natural resources, the oil, the gas, even the level of arid areas or semi-arid areas that are in Nigeria is not as much as there is here. So when we do try to compare, we also try to look at the constraints within which the government is working. And as I said earlier, the issue is not about running to the scene now, but actually having a plan to be able to address this issue. And as I mentioned, the government of Kenya does have the grain reserves. The government of Kenya does have ministries of agriculture, special programs, and so on. And if you're listening to the ministers in these areas, they will also be telling you passionately what they have tried to do in order to address these issues. And the question you ask, what should the government do? I think this is also an African issue. We should be thinking about what should we do, because the government only represents us as Kenyans, as Africans. And only when we all stand up and take the government to question and try also to do our best in order to have these things done, then it will not be done. The government can only create policy environments, but the implementation of the policies is left for the Kenyans
For the Kenyan people to decide.
watch over it and make sure that it happens. If you create irrigation facilities in Africa, in many cases you find them vandalized. I'm not saying that happens in Kenya, but then we need to have collective responsibility for what happens to us and collectively look for solutions and avoid blame games.
All right, avoiding blame games. Yesterday we had the Prime Minister saying that, we are having this crisis, but yet again, we've tried to do something by bringing in GM maize, which is now becoming a controversial issue in the country. Some are for, some are against, and I know both of you have studied the GM, genetically modified organisms, from maize to rice to everything. Maybe you can start talking about that now and telling the Kenyans what they need to know about GM maize. What is it? What is the controversy that surrounds it? What is bad with it? What is good with it? Maybe you can start with what is good with it.
Okay, now genetically modified organisms, GMOs, and GM maize in particular, are simply ways that scientists have tried in order to be able to alter the genes of these crops or these organisms in order to improve its qualities in different ways, maybe in the ways of drought resistance, pest resistance, disease resistance, increasing productivity. These are all the objective functions, the reasons for which genetic modification came into place within the scientific community. But like every other technology, it has risks and it has benefits. Right. And what has always happened is that when the discussions regarding the risks and benefits of any piece of technology is being debated in the public, you have those who are for and those who are against. And again, my call will be for caution. And that caution would be to know that everything has a risk and everything has a benefit, and call for deeper studies. In Kenya, what does genetically modified maize mean for the Kenyan? The taste, the possible health impacts, the possible health impacts, I don't mean the negative sides of it, but actually even the positive sides of it. But that we need to actually step back from a political debate to a reality check. And that reality check would be what would be the pros and cons of importing the GM maize to Kenya. And I can tell you some of the pros, and I also can tell you some of the cons. Some of the pros are, as I have mentioned, that the main purpose of genetic modification is to improve quality in one way or the other. Either improve productivity, which would be good for Kenya, or improve the quality, the taste, the texture, the storability, and all those kinds of things, which we have discussed as a problem. But again, there has been evidence in research that genetic modification of organisms, eating these genetic modifications, might, and I have to stress that fact, might have other impacts that are not intended. And like I've said, that happens with every other technology. But I look at the debate, and we are citing examples of studies in Canada, studies in the UK, in Scotland, in France, and everywhere. Have we really done studies in Kenya to understand the implications of genetic modification, of genetically modified crops for Africa? Or is it, again, an ad hoc response? Hey, we have drought this year, and we knew we were going to have drought, and now we have to import genetically modified crops. So my own response to it would be, let us study more. Let us try and understand this. I like the debate that is going on, but I would like the debate to be informed by science.
Would you say the same, Dr. Nicholas?
Yeah, I would say the same, in the sense that Dr. Kevin had said, it has its negative sides, it has its positive sides. And that follows any technology that comes to place. GMO, they have really proven, they have good qualities in terms of providing for increased yield. That is the promise of GMO, resistance to diseases and pests and all those. And in Kenya today, the issue in question, which we say is as a result of ad hoc planning or lack of long-term planning, is that 4 million people are hungry. They are facing starvation. And because of that, we have our hands tied. What do we do to rescue these 4? We have seen pictures here.
Yes.
You know, people are hungry and they are dying. Will there be another manna that will fall from heaven for these people? How do we do it? And maybe government